I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room. Earlier this month, as part of the Capitol Press Room television broadcast, we sat down with Assemblymember Phil Steck, a Capital Region Democrat who successfully pushed through legislation here at the Capitol designed to require social media companies to respond in a timely fashion to search warrants. Here's an excerpt of that conversation. What was the impetus for this legislation?
So we had a constituent whose grandson had died as a result of some drug that he bought on the internet, and it was tainted with fentanyl, and that's what caused his death. The police were already on to that particular drug dealer. A search warrant had been issued to the social media company, but there wasn't timely compliance, and that is what resulted in the individual's death.
So 72 hours to comply with a search warrant is the language that's in your legislation. Does that mean that any information that is requested needs to be handed over within that time period? Do you need to make a good faith gesture that you're just getting the ball rolling? What do you expect with this?
Well, I think the legislation clearly requires compliance, meaning provide the information. Whether there's going to be stalling and horsing around, I can't answer that. I would hope not. I would hope they would realize that this is very important, can save lives, but we don't know what's going to happen in actual practice. These social media companies have become so powerful,
right,
and so in many ways arrogant, that I'm not so sure they can see the error of their ways.
Well, what would be sort of an enforcement tool that a local prosecutor's office could turn to if, as you say, this powerful social media platform says, no thank you, or it's going to take us longer?
They'd have to ask the court to hold them in contempt. And contempt can involve fines, it can involve imprisonment, but it would be that kind of a process.
So this is not a unique legislation to New York. I saw that I think Colorado had something similar. But despite the fact that other states are doing something like this, how do you get around any sort of maybe First Amendment concerns or Fourth Amendment concerns about search and seizure? Is that something that you're trying to navigate here at all?
Not really, because the First Amendment or Fourth Amendment concerns would be in the nature of the warrant itself. So if they were seeking, something that was protected under the First Amendment, like your communications with your colleagues about issues that you raise on the show, that would clearly be protected under the First Amendment. It would not be a valid warrant. But the proper thing to do would be not to ignore it, but to move to quash it. And then you had asked about Fourth Amendment. So you can't issue a search warrant that is not sufficiently particularized. What they used to call a general warrant is what the Constitution prohibits. You can't just say, I want to see any and all of this because I might find something there. You have to have discrete probable cause to know that you are looking for something, and you have to have evidence that supports that there is illegal activity going on.
And you mentioned the idea of quashing one of these warrants. If a social media platform does decide, I want to try to stop this, I have an issue with this, I see a potential constitutional challenge, would that pause that 72-hour clock?
That would be up to the court.
Okay. And do you think, from your perspective, does it make sense to pause to air out those concerns?
It depends on what the questions are. If you have knowledge of drug trafficking, I think it's a very hard argument to make that somehow because you're a social media company that the First Amendment is involved in some way, particularly if the police know, what account the particular activity is coming from. They've particularized that. I would say that I would think that any type of action by the social media company to try and stop compliance would be inappropriate.
And I think that's an important point you bring up, the particular accounts. It's not necessarily judges going to be authorizing wide phishing expeditions. You're probably going to have to say this user or maybe this list of users are where we're going.
Absolutely.
So in the process of moving this bill, it was amended and ultimately abandoned a requirement that covered platforms have a dedicated hotline for law enforcement.
Yeah.
Was that a policy decision where you said, hey, ultimately we don't think this makes sense, or was that more of a political decision of, hey, if we want to move this bill, we got to strike this?
So the objection to that provision, which does exist, I believe, in the Colorado bill, was raised by Assembly staff on the grounds that for some reason it was unfair to the social media companies. I don't really understand that. A dedicated phone line doesn't mean that you have one single person sitting there 24 hours a day.
Mark Zuckerberg's manning that phone.
Yeah, exactly. It means that you have a phone that who's ever on that duty, it would kick to that person to respond. I think it was a very reasonable requirement that required minimal involvement by the social media companies, but sometimes it's better to just let it go and get the bill passed than to get into a discussion about that.
That issue, though, that you raise about the law enforcement having someone to call is a broader concern that we see with social media companies, like if someone's account is hacked or if someone maybe committed suicide and they want to close off this account. Is that something that you think the legislature should be considering in the future?
Yeah, I think eliminating that part of the bill was a mistake for the reasons that you cite, because the police need to have someone to go to, not to be lost and bounced around as we all can be by various corporate entities. So I think that we'll see how it works. Hopefully it will work as is and won't need that. But I think it was a little short-sighted not to include that in the bill. And again, it's a minimal requirement. These are computer companies. They can certainly bounce a phone call to any number of people. So I didn't see it. To this day, I thought it was really not a very sensible argument.
Well, I was curious, though, do you think there's a case to be made for an even broader set of hotlines and, hey, if you've had your account hacked or if you were trying to close it, here's who you call? Because even your own Assembly Speaker had his Twitter account hacked and couldn't figure out how to reclaim it.
This is a real problem. I've had that with Facebook, where there was a Facebook profile out about me that had almost totally inaccurate data. Trying to get it closed was a struggle. I don't know if it is closed at all. I think I may have given up. I even wrote a letter to the general counsel of Meta.
But that speaks to the issue. Who do you reach out to?
Yeah, it's terrible, and you can't get people on the phone with a lot of these companies to get anything done. That's a whole problem in that industry. It's not like they're not making enough money.
What's been your experience, whether it's this bill or some of the other efforts that you've seen in Albany to try to regulate social media platforms? Does it seem like there's a willingness to police these guys, or is there an argument that you hear? No,
I think there's a real willingness, and the governor has been strong on protecting children, particularly from the hazards of social media.
Sure.
Most of what's being done is with children because the argument for protection is greater. There is a greater ability to regulate First Amendment speech when it comes to children than there is with adults. So I haven't seen anything that was intrusive with respect to the First Amendment in this area, except for with respect to trying to protect children. That is something that's high in the minds of many, many people.
And that was the conversation we recorded earlier this month for the Capitol Press Room television broadcast with Assemblymember Phil Steck, a Capital Region Democrat. To find all of our video interviews, you can check out our YouTube page or catch the Capitol Press Room television broadcast on your local PBS station.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided by New York State United Teachers, a statewide union of nearly 700,000 professionals in education and healthcare.